Yes, so today we're gonna discuss about multispecies relationality. The case that we will bring into this class will be coming from Waimanu and Umbu Pabal, Central Sumba, which actually two areas where Hani, Arin, and Lechi conducted field work for 1.5 months. So, okay, so a review of this, well, not research, but basically this presentation. But I want to give you, information about what actually we four of us do. Actually, there are five of us. One of them is Bagas, but unfortunately, Bagas couldn't attend the session because he's in the field work. So there we go. There are four of us. So the center theme of this research is about biocultural diversity. So actually, Arin, Lechi, and Hani was involved in as interns in the internship program between Department of Anthropology and BRWA, Badan Registrasi Wilayah Adat. It's an NGO focusing on the tenurial rights, the lands of indigenous peoples, and how to, um, make like formalizing the the lands of the indigenous land itself. And the approach that is being taken for this research is transdisciplinary approach. So that's why if you hear what my students say that they are coming from anthropology and one is from geography. And actually, other than anthropology and geography, there is also students coming from biology, so that's why it's called transdisciplinary approach. And of course, transdisciplinary doesn't mean that the knowledge coming from the campus or the formal institutions, but the knowledge also comes from the people that we do the research with. So that's why this approach we we use the approach, or we try to incorporate the knowledge of indigenous peoples, the Waimanu and Umbu Pabal peoples, the anthropology and geography knowledge, and also the biological knowledge. Because this research is about biocultural diversity, I think it will be an interesting idea or interesting discussion today to talk about multiple species, or usually we know as multispecies, or maybe human and non-human, or human and other than human. So I will explain later in our next slides about how this multispecies emerged and how it relates to this research. So, for the starter, multispecies is, of course, very related with biocultural perspective. To quote Eben Kursky here, so an emergent cohort of multispecies ethnographers began to place a fresh emphasis on the subjectivity and agency of organisms whose lives are entangled with humans. If we look at the approach or the multi-species perspective, we put other than human, or um, for various species having their own agency. So as you know that we might be familiar with the notion or the ideas that human is the highest intelligent species. Human is the one who has agency. Human beings are the only species that can, that can make usage of other species without the other species cannot do something similar to humans. Maybe we're kind of familiar with that hegemony, but multispecies seeing things as, every species having their own agency and having their own way to influence their surroundings, influence their environment. Um, and this presentation actually will be connected to the scholars' theorization about relations, exchange, gift or donation, predation, protection, production, and transmission. That will be explained by um, Hani, Arin, and also Lechi. Okay, so to break the ice, could you identify existing multi-species relations around you? So, because as I mentioned before, that multi-species is like human and other than human, like every kind of species that you can meet. So maybe if you can identify existing multi-species relations around you, could you maybe you can raise your hand or type something in the chat? Or if Arin, Hani, or Lechi have something in mind, feel free to do so. What do you think, or what you see as like multispecies relationships or relations around you? Maybe I will start. Um, I see the multispecies relations as the relationship between my cat and I. So maybe for others, it can be seen that I own my cat, but I think sometimes my cat owns me. I need to like obey what they what my cat wants. I need to follow what the schedule of their feeding schedule, so it's kind of example. Yes, it is. So that's just a fun example. You can find other examples. Do you have? Okay, if you are still like thinking or wondering the relationship, or you don't want to type or speak it out, that's totally fine. I will move on to the next presentation, next slide, I mean. Okay, so what is multispecies? So I quoted from the Campianu. I think I put this source into our group chat on WhatsApp. So basically, it's multispecies studies is a field that was born out of the pressures generated by questioning the centrality of the human in a number of disciplines. So it came from the critics, from the realization of how we always put the human as the center of any kind of study, any kind of research, any kind of discussion and discourse. And by normalizing and extending questions and interest in ethics and power relations, and especially in the immediate visible materiality of a world in the midst of destruction, a kind of ethical ethnographic practice may be driven by assuming an effective relationship to other forms of living, of being alive on this planet. So actually, what this text tries to emphasize is to see the relationship between these various species, this um, uh, the bit among this many species that live in this planet or maybe outside this planet, you know, to and to see this relationship means to actually see the continuity or even modification or even the transformation of the environment of the system where the species live in. So there are some key ideas in studying multispecies. Of course, we understand that it's about human and other than human, and it's about the agency of both human and non-human species as active beings. So we don't see even the viruses, even the microbes, even the rock, or even the something that we see that it's not something that can actively doing something, but in this multispecies we see them as active beings. And of course, because multispecies is about the system of different species, of like a lot of species, it always relates to the relationship. And the last one that I want to emphasize here is about the arts of noticing. If you aren't sing readers, maybe you've realized about this praise arts of noticing, where actually when we do research using multispecies perspective or multispecies approach, we will use the our understanding. Maybe if you've done the qualitative research or using the um, any kind of qualitative research, you will get used to um, interview other people, or like knowing information through like talking with other people, but through this multispecies we also try to understand other species by observing them, by um, understanding them, by like seeing, looking at them, by being aware of what is happening uh, in the ecosystem, in the place. For example, we are observing the river. We are aware of the flow of the water. Is it like um, is it the flow different if we compare it from the morning and then afternoon and then evening and the night? Is it like different? And what kind of species or what kind of other beings living in that river? um, are those living beings live in that river only in particular times? Are there different dynamics in that river in the sense of, for example, different plants, or how animals ate something from the plants? That kind of observing, that kind of noticing things, even from the sounds. Maybe if you hear the bird sounds, the bird chirping in the morning, and then you observe it, and that sound of the bird gone when you go through the night, for example. Why is that? Why does it happen? So like questioning the things that you used to hear, you used to see, you used to go through the day. It's the actually way of noticing this multispecies in order to understand this multispecies way of thinking, or multispecies approach. Okay, so now we move on to the species turn. If we look at the writing from the Kirksey and Helmbridge, actually we know that the research or the discourse about multispecies um, was done in 1868 by Morgan through the writings. It's called The American Beaver and His Work. So basically, in this book, Morgan talked a lot about how beaver has their way of knowledge, their way of doing something, their way of working together and collect the woods to to create their place. So that's basically what this book's about. It's the first first track that Kiersky and Helmbridge can found, and then we move on to the because it's 1868, so it's basically the 19th century, and then in the 20th century, there is classification of natural and animal, especially in anthropology, and this classification of natural and animal creates the dualism. The natural science is seen as something factual, as something fixed, um, and also the animal, the things that we learn about the moving things can be dynamics. It's not fixed state. That kind of notion or idea. And then in late 20th century, the scholars, the disciplines started to question about the duality of nature and culture, what considered facts and what not, especially the emergence of, for example, the feminist disciplines started to question. And even in this late 20th century, the biologists started to question when we talk about race. Actually, if we trace about race, it relates to how genomes moves, how when people migrates, there is a different way of how genomes work in a person, and then in a community. So it always relates to how the nature and the culture, because at that time the discussion about race is um, still like prominent. And then the 21st century, there was a critical examination about evolution, genetic technologies, and also the nature culture divide. And to quote Singh, human nature is an interspecies relationship. It means that we, as human beings, of course, we don't live alone with only humans. There are a lot of things. There are like viruses, there are bacterias, there are animals, there are plants, there are even the unseen things that live together with us, unseen entities. So it's not about like human beings only consists of human beings, but human nature is an interspecies relationship. And actually, one of the scholar, he's also anthropologist, Latour, sees the similarity between politicians and biologists. Maybe anyone want to guess what actually he's trying to imply between politicians and biologists? Anyone want to guess? Just guess anything that you think of. Why Latour sees the similarity between politicians and biologists?
Maybe in terms of conservation,
Conservation? In what way of conservation do you mean?
I would see biologists are people who are very supportive of conservation, where they see forest as something that's pristine and can't be touched by humans, so that it can be naturally prosper and grow. And I feel like that aligns with how politicians think nowadays, especially in the government area, maybe where they see they need to acquire some land for national parks for that conservation to succeed in a biological perspective kind of way.
All right. So Lechi said that. Thank you so much, Lechi, for your comment. So Lechi has this idea about the similarity of politicians and biologists, and also Paulina sent me a direct message. The similarity they must convince the public of the validity of their results. So, thank you so much, Paulina and Lechi, for giving out your comments. So it's actually close. So while Latour sees politicians and biologists as similar, because um, usually politicians speak on behalf of the people, right? Politicians try to represent the people that the politicians lead. For example, like DPR or representatives. Those representatives. That's why it's called representatives, because they speak on behalf of the people, a lot of people in like the citizens. And while the biologist, Latour said that biologists represent or speak on behalf of the plants, the animals that they study, that they do their research on. So that's the similarity, like speak the behalf of, on behalf of, or like represent them. That's the similarity of the politicians and biologists. And I quote the statement from the Kursky and Helmbridge. They said that animals may fuse, refuse, and confuse nature culture categories and ontologies. A multi-species approach to ethnography must engage with the outer worlds of other beings. Ethnographic studies of biocapital, biodiversity, and biosociality must all grapple with problems of representation. So, when we talk about like biocapital, where it's related to the capital accumulation, like, or biodiversity as what also involves in the research of um, about central Sumba, and also the biosociality. It actually relates with the representation of the multispecies. It's not only human beings. It relates to the plants, to animals, to any kind of species that are also exist in the environment. And when we talk about multispecies, um, actually we can think of other human beings or non-human beings as why many scholars think of the concept of personhood, because in when we learn about law and politics, persons are recognized as having certain capacities, certain agencies, certain will, so that's why they can sue and they can be sued, right? So that's why it's called the idea of personhood in law and politics. So why for hundreds of years human beings see those other than human entities as something below them, because of course human beings don't see them as person. Human beings don't see them having agency. So that's why many scholars focusing on this multi-species, like environmental scholars, try to reimagine the concept of personhood, that also um, like the personhood is also those other than human, so person is different than human. So now um, I will ask you to go deep to this writing from Philip Descola. So if you wonder why, now we jump into the Descola's lens. Why? So it's because Descola wrote about bio-nature and culture. It's actually a quite packed book. It's a really, really interesting book. I really recommend you to read that. And actually, while the Scola developed this idea about the relationships, ecological relationships, um, the scholar hasn't, um, you know, hasn't, the idea of multispecies hasn't been so known at that time. So it's very interesting to see the how multispecies can be connected or related to the concept of the ecological relations created by Descola. So actually, I talked about Descola, but who is Descola? So basically, Descola is a French anthropologist who did ethnographic research with the Achuar peoples located in the Amazonian forest. It's near Peru, where he started to criticize the nature and culture binary. Remember um, when we discussed from the previous slides about the division of nature and culture, where the division means like one is very factual, one is not really factual. So Descola started to criticize that while he doing research with the Ashur peoples. So he emphasizes relationships among different species and how it is entangled and connects with each other. So he tries to see actually how the relationships um, in such environment exist. How not only the relationships among peoples or between people, but also people or human beings and um, non-human beings in that actual people's context. And the beyond and nature cultures, as it's the scholars work, discuss about ecology of relationship, addressing various ways of how people can be in relationship with the world and how it influences human world. As I mentioned before, if we see the or look at the context, um, during the time the scholar developed this, the idea of multispecies, um, it's all actually it started to be discussed, to be talked about, but not in the like as popular as multi-species concept now. So that's why I bold the word people, because when the scholar wrote this, sometimes the bias is still there, like seeing the people as the like the center, like how people connects with, for example, plants, animals, their habits, their traditions, and using, like, for example, zones, and there's the unseen entities, how people relates to that, but not like the other way around. So the emphasis is still in the people. And I know I've talked a lot, and after this I will give my students their turn, but this is like for like a very very brief about the naturalism as an historical process. This is actually exists in the Bio Nature and Culture, the scholars book. So we know that it actually a historical process in ways we see nature, like animal classification, the Christianism, that seeing the man has a divine origin, and then the Renaissance time, the pictorial perspective started to see the nature, and then the scientific revolution in the 17th century, where it's very mechanical, a mechanical approach, where seeing it's a very fixed lines between like nature and culture, like the nature and like the other than nature, or like culture and um other than culture, this a very fixed lines, facts and not the facts, like um fixed and more dynamics. That's kind of binary that actually evolves from century to century. And also this is another concept of ontologies from the Schola about the animism. So animism, well, interiority is something that that seen as in the interior self. For example, like feelings, what you think, what something that the emotions, something that you can't really see, but the physicality is something that you can see. It's something that substance, it's something that physical. So basically, animism is seen as the similar in the inside, but different in the physical way. And then totemism is like similar in the inside and like also similar on the outside. So if you see that in totemism, if you my bad, I don't include the picture of totem here, but if you see the totem, there is actually um the imagery of something that you can see that the higher of that totem is, the higher the status, or the higher the higher the symbol is, it means the higher the status is. And then the analogism, and also naturalism. If you wondering about this, please ask me on the Q&A. We will discuss later. But okay, for now, we will continue with the students here. Lechi. Please, Lechi.
Uh, okay.
Sorry.
Uh, Thank you, Mbak Kitin, for the explanation regarding the descolarization and also about multi-species. So actually, in like descolarization, there's several ways to see how relationality works. The first one is exchange, and in exchange, there has to be a reciprocity, and we can see this pattern. We can see a lot of this pattern inside like everyday routine in Central Sumba custom activities or like ritual. So the first one that me and my friend witness is rain rituals. So most of the rice field or like the paddy fields in central Sumba are dry fields, which means that those kind of fields depends completely on rainfall for their watering system. And because of that, too much or like too little rain can damage their productivity of harvest. So sometimes people perform rituals to call for a rain or to stop a rain when it's necessary. Uh, these rituals, they perform it by sacrificing chickens and also bring an offering, like siripinang for their ancestor that they called marapu. So the sacrifices and offering, they are asking for help in controlling the weather, so the rice field can survive throughout the season. So like they do sacrifice, they make an offering. In return, they asking from their ancestor for like a better weather for their productivity of their harvest. So you can see there's like a reciprocity inside that. And for like other case that we can see is the dowry exchange. The dowry exchange system in the in the Central Sumba customary practice. So like in Sumbanese custom, dowry is not only given by the man, but also from the woman's family. So the men's sides give buffaloes, goats, horses in the amounts of like hundreds of them, while the women's sides, they will respond it by giving pigs, woven traditional clothes, elephant tusks, and also like a bunch of household items. So from this exchange, it reflects like a cooperation between two families. Uh, and like there's also other ritual example from the coastal area of Waimanu area. So they're a community, a coastal community. They have like a special fishing tradition that they held every few years. So at that time, they will gather around the beach to catch fish called tire fish. That fish only existed on that Waimanu coastal area. So before they began to catch the fishes, they have to perform certain rituals, and that rituals involving a sacrifice of chickens, buffaloes, and even goats. Uh, so that so that ritual is like a symbolism of offering they made to their ancestors. Uh, they're asking for like a permission and also a blessing. So the fishing activity that years can run safely, smoothly, and also successfully. And also like last but not least, there also a case of tradition on their funeral ceremonies. So on their death ceremonies, they like to do an exchange. Uh, it's an exchange of livestocks between two parties called Ngabawini and Yera. So Ngabawini and Yera is actually a distant relatives that they are invited by the uh, deceased person families. So yeah, basically they are distant families. So this exchange of animals is actually a way for them to reconnect with a distant relatives that they are no longer live in the same village as them. And also the animals that they are exchanging and then they slaughtered is also believed to help carry the spirit of the disease into the next life. So yeah, maybe we can move on to the next slide. So another ways to see relationality from the scholar's perspective is by seeing a pattern of a gift. So there are a lot of like everyday practices in Sumba that similar with this pattern. One clear example is offering a siripinang. So if you can see a picture here on the right, it's actually a siripinang. It's like a fruit that they like to eat, like to chew. So in Sumba, siripinang is the first thing that a host gives to anyone who visit their house. Offering siripinang is seen as a basic form of mannerism, respect, and hospitality. So if a host fails to provide siripinang to their guests, the host will like it will create like a sense of shame because it means that they are not properly welcome their guests. And after they serve the siripinang to their guests, uh, the host will serve other things such as like tea, coffee, or other snacks. The simple act, we can see that it shows that how practice of giving is tied to maintaining like a social harmony between guest and host. So like another example of gift is it exists in the agricultural rituals. So after they doing a harvest, they will do like a rituals. And after they do rituals, they gonna close it by offering a food to their ancestor spirit. They will prepare like a small basket, and inside of it there will be a rice and also like a roasted chicken liver. This offering is made as a gesture of gratitude and also respect for the blessing they receive throughout the farming season to their ancestors. It reflects that they believe the ancestor helped to ensure successful harvest. So therefore, they have to show their gratitude. They have to thank the ancestor for that.
Okay, and then I will be continuing for the presentation. Besides the act of giving, like Hani has already mentioned, There's also the practice of taking without giving anything back. For example, the hunt of wild boars. They're seen as pests that disturb paddy fields and gardens, so that's why they're being hunted by the people, and the people usually consume the wild boars themselves. And also, another example is fish hunting with a drag net that are laid on the shore and can catch all sorts of seafood, such as crabs, kerapu fish, shrimps, that will be sold to market traders. There is also another instrument, a traditional instrument, to catch fishes called karaki, which is basically coconut leaves that are tied to one another and being laid from one side of the beach to another side of the beach. And it is believed that these coconut leaves can attract the fishes. And these are just some of the pictures that explain what I've already mentioned. The second picture from the right is the dragnet that I've mentioned being used by fishermen in Tangairi Beach, where the ikan tairi that Hani mentioned lives. And then we can go to the next slide. Okay. Another mode of relation is protection. So in Waimanu and Umbu Pabal, the relation between humans, spirits, animals, and the land form a mode of protection, a system where beings care for each other through ritual, reciprocity, and respect. In Umbu Pabal, their sacred forest called Taliang Marapu surrounds a sacred cave with a 500-meter protected circle. No one can enter except through a yearly ritual called Purung Taliang Marapu. Purung means going down to the Taliang Marapu or the forest. It is a ritual descent where people ask Marapu for abundance, cleansing, and permission at the cave. The forest is not just a protected land, but it also protects the community, and the community protects it through the ritual boundaries. If one disobeys the rule, it is believed that the person won't find a way out of the woods, and they might be attacked by marapu that's believed to be incarnated into sacred monkeys. And then moving on to the sea, the tairi fish that Hani mentioned before in the Tangairi beach actually has a pleasant and distinct fragrance. So if you do go to Sumba, I recommend you guys should probably try a tairi fish. And it is believed to be so fragrant because their ancestors usually use coconut oil and herbs to attract the fish. And so then they believe the fragrance suddenly transmitted to the fish. And tidy fish can only actually be caught twice a year and through I would say like a formation called netting, which is a coordinated netting ritual where fishermen form two lines near the shore, guided by their local leader called Trato. And the sea seems to respond to this collective rhythm. Um, Only when the community breathe and acts together do the Tairi swim willingly into the waiting nets. And once the fishes are caught and brought to the shore, it never belongs to a single person. The rato stands before the nets and redistribute all of the Tairi evenly through the community, ensuring that no one takes more than their share. This rule is not merely social, it is ecological, spiritual, and enforced by forces beyond the human. Those who try to hoard or exploit the catch risk invoking apek, which is the belief that something bad or a bad omen might get to you. And this particular thing that's bad is, for example, they believe the ancestral spirits will shape into different animals. For example, sharks in the open seas might able to attack you, or crocodiles in the river with their mouth, and serpents in the deep forest. And in these forms, the ancestors that defend the balance that binds humans, animals, and place. So then, in this world, the sea's abundance is not a resource but a relationship, one that thrives only when the community acts collectively, ethically, and with respect for every species that helps sustain life. But for the past few years, the ritual hasn't been implemented because the prior rato that let the ritual have died, and the person who replaced the role doesn't remember the prayers quite well. And if you mispronounce the prayers, it is believed that you will have bad omen. So that's why the the person who replaces is a bit scared to do it, and now there is no regeneration for this particular practice. Okay, and for the next example is particularly for the house or umma. So in the umma, there's usually four sacred pillars that are chosen through long discussion among kin. Relatives decide together when the house must be renewed, and only then do they enter the forest, after formally asking Marapu for permission. When they find a potential tree, they perform nyakba, which is basically praying for the Marapu and reading the signs in chicken intestines to see whether Marapu approves. A tree becomes a pillar only when the spirits agree. Building a house is therefore not an act of taking from the forest, but a dialogue between human trees and the Marapu. One of the pillars must come from a wood called mayala, a tree believed to possess its own will. People say mayala can appear and disappear in the forest, hopping from one place to another. It is so spiritually charged that some villagers actually have cried upon seeing it. Its sap is said to be red like human blood. Because of this power, when the community finds a mayala tree for an umma, they must shoot it with a spear called kayaka to anchor it in place. Otherwise, the tree must maybe vanish before it can be respectfully cut. Across the landscape, sacred sites like Batu Kilat, Katoda stones, sacred wells, and certain rocky areas are treated as living beings. The Batu Kilat is actually bathed in the cave of Talyang Marapu, and Katoda serves as rituals in gardens, rice fields, and beaches. And the sacred well cannot be used for daily needs. Actually, newcomers must be introduced to the ancestral spirits who guard it. So when me and my friends first came to the sacred well, they did a ritual where they introduced us to the spirits near the area. And especially in Umbu Pabal, some areas cannot be stepped on because they hold past death or ancestral presence. Stepping there invites bad omen, or as they call it, bala. And so this is actually interesting because it portrays that the land remembers or hold memories, and the people respond to those memories essentially. And then the last example, companions such as Uraha-ahu or dogs and Dewajara or horses are seen as lifelong companions, sharing social and spiritual life. And they believe they need to accompany the person or their owner into the afterlife, continuing their companionship beyond the world of the living. Through these relations, protection emerge. Human protect forest, fish, sites, companions, and in return, these beings protect the community, its well-being, and its moral order. And you can go to the next slide.
Okay, so the next slide is about how the community's resource production system. Uh, the community resource production system is not just resource extraction, it is a system of shared living space and functional reciprocity. They use smart functional zoning to maintain specialized relationships with the plants and soil. They maintain near house gardens or which act like a living pantry, a direct daily relationship with spices and medicine. And to manage risk, they use a clever dual approach for rice, like wet rice fields that relied on controlled water, and while the dry rice fields is rely directly on the sky and rain. This diversity ensures that regardless of which species, water or rain dominates the season, their food security remains stable. And the sustainability is strictly enforced by their customary law, which acts as the social contract governing the multispecies world. Even their cultivation is controlled with customary law, mandating long fallow periods, a necessary rest period that respect the regeneration of the soil and vegetation. For obtaining timber, they respect the non-human subject by using selective logging, And this ensure they only harvest necessary trees, maintaining the health of the entire forest community. Furthermore, their recent adaptation is a perfect example of shifting multi-species relations. After the national park restricted access, they planted mahogany trees near their homes in the Kaliwu plots or the near gardens. The Kaliwu zone, which is we can go to the next slide. So in this map, the Kaliwu zone, which is symbolized by the brighter yellow on the map you saw, now shows more vegetative cover than the distant garden or Oma. The Kaliwu or the near gardens now serves a dual function as a living pantry and a managed self-created timber forest, showing a controlled immediate relationship with the tree species. And we can go to the next slide. Okay, so the next slide is the second key part is the knowledge transmission system, which ensures this ethical relationship continues. They use specific teaching methods to educate the youth on these multi-species contracts. The first one is a practical skills that taught through direct practice, such as gardening knowledge, and through observing the animal world, such as reading nature, like the red dragonfly as a sign of rain and treating the dragonfly as an ecological informant. And then there is cultural history and ethics that taught in customary ceremonies where they recite traditional verses like Leci mentioned before, is Uraahu Dewa Jara to instill ecological values. And then finally, the Marapu belief or ancestral faith is maintained through oral rules. This belief system is the spiritual foundations that grant personhood or respectful status to many elements of the natural world, thereby safeguarding the core ethical framework of their multi-species land management. Sorry, Mbak.
Excuse me, but you're still on mute.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, sorry everyone. So I'm gonna close this presentation by connecting what the multi-species and the experiences, the research that have been explained by Hani, Leci, and also Arin in Central Sumba, especially Umbu Pabal and Waimanu, with the multi-species justice. So actually, when we see those real examples from the Waimanu and Umbu Pabal, we see how it really connects the peoples have their own way, their own knowledge to um, to maintain the relationship, to connect with those other than human beings, to connect with or non-human beings. For example, when we see or when we remember that the when people they have like this belief, and they pass on the story where when they want to get the mayala wood, mayala tree, the mayala can move, you know, if you don't get to it closely and carefully. You need to be so aware, and you know, from that story about the, it's just one example about the mayala wood or the mayala tree, right? It means that the people already have understanding and knowledge how the those other than human have their agency, or how Waimanu and Umbu Pabal have belief of apek or something bad that will come to you, or you will get if you don't do rituals, if you don't use things respectfully. And you know, when we talk about apek or bad things that happen to you, it relates to the ancestors or the unseen entities it means that those unseen entities is understood by the people as, something that have agency, that have also the power towards the people, not only the people having the power towards those non-human beings or other than human beings. um and actually I found this a good, quote in the book of Chow, Bolender, and Kirksey. It's called The Multispecies Justice. I really recommend you to read that. So it said like experience of many different kinds of people, including disabled, queer, brown, black, indigenous, or minority religious communities who continue to bear the burden of imposed comparisons to the non-human. So why we talk about multispecies justice? Of course, as Singh said, that human nature is an interspecies relations, interspecies ecosystem. So we don't live alone as human beings. We live together with other than human things, other than human entities, other than human beings. So if you maybe those acknowledging and implementing the multi-species justice can be start in our everyday life. It's just one step. For example, when we maybe you say like implying like bad word to other people using the kind of animals. It's just like simple example. When you see how other species is like lower than human beings. Or in this book, Chow, Bolender, and Kirksky, in the first chapter, they discuss actually about the case of indigenous West Papua indigenous peoples when there is uh, a bad word implying to them as monkey, as a monkey, like implying to the people. So it means that actually when we see the injustice towards the people, towards the, for example, indigenous peoples, or in the book you can see the how the details of how the injustice is implied there. But when you imply the multi-species injustice, maybe it also not implying those other than human beings only, but also the human beings that you see lower than you, or like you see is like having the the different status or different or lower agency than you. So it what this excerpt, this statement is implying to us. And the last one, I will quote Anna Singh actually. Making worlds is not limited to humans. Humans too have always been involved in multi-species world making. So that's why I think multi-species justice will be the conclusion of this presentation. Thank you so much everyone for listening to us to our presentation for an hour. So thank you so much. And um maybe I want to give an applause, a standing applause if I can, for three of my students, Hani, Arin, and Lechi. Thank you so much, Hani, Arin, and Lechi. And now we're entering the discussions or Q&A. Please, everyone, go raise any question, any thoughts, any discussion, comments. Or else, I think Hani, Arin, and Lechi has something to ask you maybe if you... Okay. Shifa Kairunisa, the mic
Yeah.
is yours.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you for the presentation. This is a very new topics for me to delve on. Just to add context, my background is from psychology, and I can say, as I work on with these organizations at Jiwa that focus on educating. People about mental health, and especially we try to uh, the the multidiscipline approach that you guys have been talking about in this presentation. So this is really enlightening for me. My question is, I don't know if this is a question or maybe I really want to uh, get to know your perspective on this. This is the first time that I heard about multi-species perspective, and this is, I think, uh, in line with what we in as mental health educators are trying to do nowadays. That is teaching people about eco empathy. So what I want to ask is, as uh, those who already studied and obviously already applied it on your studies and your educate and your efforts in educating people, how difficult it is to apply multi-species perspective, how difficult it is for laymen and people in general to apply multi-species perspective on their everyday actions, because we talked before in this presentation about about how in our local knowledges, I think no matter where your tribe from, or your where you came from, I think when we talk about local knowledge, there is a multi-species perspective already embedded in our I can say ancestor, but our leluhur perspective. But as we can observe, what we call modern perspective, I quote modern, is there's this rampant view in youth. This is just my observation, yeah, as someone that came from Sumatra Barat, West Sumatra. There's this rampant view on the youth that there's a disconnect with the knowledges of our grandparents and great grandparents about how to respect the environment, and instead they embrace the idea that human is the superior being, and pay little minds to the environment, to non-human beings. So I think that is the question that I have in my mind as I watch your presentations. So in your view, how difficult it is to reintroduce that perspective, that multi-species perspective, on especially youth nowadays, because yeah, this when we talk about the nation's I don't know, keberlanjutan, please help me here. It is on the hands of youth, and I think this perspective will benefits the youth in how to handle the future of the place that we're living on. Sorry. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Shifa. It's a very, very comprehensive, insight and also question. Maybe Lechir, Arin, or Hani want to answer first?
Okay, I will try to answer. And thank you so much for the question, by the way. Well, for me personally, in the context of Sumba, regarding the regeneration and the continuity of the practices that's related to multi-species, I would say is still very embedded in their everyday lives. We would see while we're like walking down the road that there's young people that's riding their horses or guiding their sheeps, their pigs. They're basically animals that they um ternak or they're farmed. Um, and I think it has to do with the liminality or the phases of practices of their life. So basically in Sumba, they have practices when um, a new baby was born, when you're getting married, and when you passed away. And all of these practices are very close with animals. For example, that Hani already mentioned, there's an exchange of dowry that consists of buffaloes and um, pigs and horses. And also that's the same for the ritual of someone that has already been deceased. And there's also a celebration when a new baby was born where they also use these animals that they farm. So it is very um, a natural thing, I would say, for their daily lives because it's still heavily related through their phases of life. Whereas probably people in the city, like us, for example, where we don't really have those practices anymore, that's close to animals and other non-human beings. Maybe then we have a different perspective with the young people in Sumba, I would say. Maybe, yeah.
Maybe also regarding the question regarding like how to apply uh the multi-species perspective outside from uh let's say like my field anthropology, like you asked that, right? So I think like in nowadays how we develop that, we can start by like seeing a small things. You don't have to see like at first you don't have to see like a ritual or something like that. We can start by like our surrounding, like what Mbak Kitin mentioned before, maybe like the relationship as simple as like you and your pets, like how the relationship is being built, or like uh just see that like those kind of simple things. Like I think by seeing those kind of simple things, it can like develop or create like a sensitivity, and I think it can also help like to see the multi-species like uh other than like maybe like our everyday things like that, or like in my opinion I think it's like that.
Okay, thank you, Leci and Hani. So, Arin, if you want to jump in, feel free. But actually, I want to like reiterate what just mentioned by Leci and Hani to to apply or to imply the multi-species perspective. I think it's important to train our sensitivity to our surroundings. As I mentioned in my earlier presentation, that like hearing, like knowing, or like paying attention to what we experience every day, to what we go through every day. For example, on the street, or when we see like the even like the birds, or like the plants, or like the fruits that we see in the trees, or whatever we see our everyday life. I think it's worth noting and worth paying attention to. And also when when I say about the implying multi-species, I also want to say to don't forget to acknowledge our bias. I mean, to acknowledge our bias when I say that, see the animal or plants, or even the maybe if you work in the lab, seeing the microbiomes, or like the bacterias, or like viruses. But like seeing things, not only those things that we find beautiful. you know when we perceive something, like for example, we go to quote unquote nature, to the sea or to the mountain, we are captivated by what we have, or like what we perceive about like beautiful. And when we see those things who we don't find beautiful enough, maybe we need to rethink why don't we find it beautiful enough. Is it like because, for example, there is a development, or because we have this idealized idea that beautiful means like nature being nature. Like how about when nature is like combined with the human activity, or what we think when we see Bantar Gebang, or what we think when we see the TPA, or like the the garbage place. How do we see that? Maybe, and there's like like the worms there, like how we see that, how we perceive that, like it can be an example to imply that kind of multi-species perspective, being aware of the surroundings and being aware of what we see as quote unquote beautiful and whatnot, and why we think so. I think maybe it can like spark some discussions or comments from others. Feel free. And also because I want to address your comment, Shifa, about the local knowledge about multispecies. Yes, of course, many indigenous knowledge having this perception or practice, and also knowledge about the multispecial relationships, multispecies justice. But again, as what I also try to remind everyone in each session, that we can think as like as an essentialism, or like seeing things as fixed, when we know that there is indigenous knowledge about multi-species things, or like multi-species relations or approach. We also need to aware that the local knowledge can also be modified. It can also be changed, or even the practice could be different, or maybe now some practice or some knowledge hasn't been practiced, because for example, the rise of like development, and any kind of development, whether it's like sustainable or not, or like the rise of capitalism in the area where the local knowledge was used to being practiced or being implied. It's just to make us aware of that when we discuss about the multi-species. I hope it answers your question, Shifa, and I hope it also give us or like spark some insights, or like any questions. Feel free, anyone. If you want to share your, and I don't know, maybe your experience, or maybe another comments, your research even, feel free to do so. Anyone want to share or ask or give us
Uh,
comments? Feel free.
or
Okay.
maybe I want to add something, but so honestly, prior to my fieldwork, I didn't expect to see such a deep connection, but uh, we, coming from a geography background, I'm trained to look at human environment interaction, and we constantly analyze the tension between environmental determinism and human adaptation. Before I went to the field, these were just concepts, but after I went to the field and learning from my anthropology friend, I saw them in action, and the community proves that adaptation is not just survival, it is a multi-species collaboration where they adjust their lives to fit the rhythms of the forest and the climate.
Yes, thank you so much, Arin, for sharing that. I think it's important knowledge for us, and to learn a lot about that multi-species context. Maybe anyone want to reflect on something or share something to us? Feel free. It doesn't have to be like questioning our presentation if you don't want to, but if you want to, feel free. If you want to share or tell us like your research, your story, or your opinion, let's let's do that. Anyone? Oh, okay. Alecia. I was wondering on multispecies relationality and how that would be used in analyzing cases with organized religion. The cases we've talked so far are used on indigenous communities and their systems of belief, which usually put a lot of emphasis on ancestors in nature. So I was wondering if it can also be used on communities with Abrahamic, Hindu, Buddhist belief. Okay, so this is a very interesting thing because a few days ago I discussed about some religious approach in environment. Like if you know Kupi, so Kupi is if anyone knows better than me, feel free to correct me. But Kupi is an organization consists of women who tries to combine the feminist perspective and also the Muslim perspective. So those women in Kupi works so much on that issue, and that's one example. And the second one in is when you talk about the Laudato Si, which I think a few months back then was talked a lot by some people, or the the Tobat Ecologis, or the that was said by by some like some prominent people, both in Indonesia or in other places. I think the approach, the religious approach in like looking at multi-species can be done, and I think the work is has already been done, like being done, yeah, being done right now. And I think it's an emerging approach, it's an emerging work to talk about, to like combine the religious perspective and also the multi-species one, knowing that other than human beings or non-human entities also have rights. They also have agency. So why so that's why, because they have agency, they have rights, the human beings cannot like destroy them. Human beings cannot take take their life away from them, you know, in a destructive manner. I mean, like for example, excessive mining, or like excessive development that destroys the environment a lot. You know, that's example. So I think the work is currently being done by a lot of organizations, Alsha. Or maybe other have questions or other have oh, especially because organized religions are so very entangled with bureaucracy more often than not, and not so much on the core beliefs of religions, which usually emphasize nature too. Interesting because unseen entities still exist too in those religions. Yes, exactly. Even when you talk about like ghost, or like um iblis, setan, those like unseen entities. And oh, I remember, actually it's relates to the um not always indigenous beliefs, but like our, maybe our beliefs that we know, for example, nggak boleh untuk buang sampah sembarangan di tempat tertentu. You can't throw away your garbage in a like strange place, or like, or tidak boleh buang air kecil di pohon karena nanti akan digigit setan, contohnya. That's example. You can't pee on the tree because ghosts will hit you. Ghosts will will make you suffer if you do that. So that's actually part of how multispecies is embodied in our life, in our in our fear, in our what we believe. That's actually a very very simple example that maybe you remember, or we actually live with that since we were little. Anyone have another question? Okay. So thank you so much, everyone. And maybe I will give chances to Leci, Arin, and Hani if you guys want to ask questions or if you want to share your research, because I know that three of them are doing research right now. It's still related with the Central Sumba, Waimanu, and Umbu Pabal. But these three have like different locus research. Maybe if you want to share, and maybe if people here having resources or similar research to talk about.
Okay, maybe I like to share a bit of my research that's currently it's still in progress. Um, so it's a bit related to multi-species because basically what I'm researching on is about the transformation of the practices, in particular the rebuilding of houses using sacred pillars or woods that we have already mentioned before. Um, as you know, I think it is being affected by the conservation regulation. And this is the case in Waimanu as the area surrounding that Waimanu is usually their sacred forest called Rami Biha, but since 1998, it is being acquired or claimed by the national park. And after that, it's kind of hard for the residents in the area in the community to gain those sacred pillars. And I'm also interested to see how it also affects the traditional medicine practices, as they also used um, how would I say, kulit kayu, or the skin of the wood in traditional oils that are still being used by a lot of people in the community. And there's also dukun, men and women dukun, or I would say, what is dukun in English?
Shaman, is it?
Dukun is shaman, yeah, shaman that still exists in that community. So yeah, that's currently what I'm researching on. Maybe if you guys have similar research experiences or stories that are interesting to tell, please feel free to share in this discussion.
Okay, Leci. Thank you so thank you so much. Oh, Brian, do you wanna share something? Feel free.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I think I can weigh in. But before I start talking, thank you everyone for such a wonderful presentation. I really enjoyed listening to all of you, and I look forward to hearing more about your research. And in response to Lecce, I guess, um, have you read Terence Sevilla's Miracles and Material Life? It's a very good recent book. It won the Benda Prize for best first book in Southeast Asian studies, and it looks exactly at, at what you're looking at, though perhaps in a different colonial context. So the book really revolves around shamans and how um, what Sevilla terms miracles intersects with material life, and I think you'll have a good time reading it, and I'm sure um, Christina is aware of this too. So I'm sure you could have really fun conversations with her about it. And I just wanted to share a bit of a reflection, I guess, on where Southeast Asian studies is going as a field and how it intersects with multi-species conversations. I think a lot of the coolest recent books that have come out, right? So Sevilla's Miracles in Material Life, Adam Babette's Pulse of the Earth, um, and another book by Faiza Zakaria, the Camphor Tree and the Elephant. All of these books look at this a divide between biology and history, between nature and culture, and they use Southeast Asia as a sort of testing ground to for to enter into these broader conversations. So I think in whatever work you do, I mean, you have to realize that there is a broader conversation that you can potentially contribute to, and that your voices will be very, and where your voices will be valued. So I look forward to seeing how you contribute to this conversation.
Okay, Leci, you want to respond? Please do if you want. Or do you want to? Okay.
Okay. I would like to say thank you so much for the recommendations, and I will definitely look into all of those things. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you so much, Brian, for the recommendation. And I think we can like discuss it further after this call if sometimes there are like other discussions needed. And I think because Brian is like doing history, PhD in history, is it right, Brian? Right? I think I is it right, Brian?
You're right. You're right.
Yeah. I actually remember about the emerging approach. I don't know if it's in the global level, but in Indonesia, I heard a talk in Universitas Gajah Mada about the emerge of using the other than human approach in history, because history was used to be about like human as the center, knowing the how human situations evolves, or how it it was traced back years ago. It's from human, but I think there's emerging approach in history. I don't know if it's how it's now in is being done in like globally about history, but I think it's a very interesting to talk about that, because in Anna Singh about mushroom, she tries to see the change of human world through the mushroom, through the move of the mushroom, and how it's like moving from one place to another, how it's like being distributed, and etc. So yeah, it's a interesting perspective for me.
Yeah. Sorry, I think I'm breaking up. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Definitely. I think that's sort of what I was getting at by when I said that there are broader conversations that your students can contribute to, especially in their research on multi-species relationships. Like this really is a global conversation, and I think that Southeast Asia has a lot to offer, and you cannot forget that. Right? You have you have the languages, you have the experience, you and you're in a you're in a good place to contribute something meaningful to these conversations.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much, Brian. And maybe last statement from Leci, Arin, or Hani. Do you want to give last statement or last thing to share? Good? Okay. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for staying here. I know it's quite late and we started quite quite early in the US, right? It's like we started at like 7 a.m. So I really appreciate some people that I know are in the US right now and but still be here, including Brian. Brian is in the New Jersey right now. So thank you so much, everyone. And next week, we will be having another guest speaker. It will be Nathan's session. I think Nathan is here. And we will be having guest speaker. So please stay tuned to any kind of announcement that we'll be having. We'll be giving you all. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lechi, Arin, and Hani for accompanying me today and giving a lot of important insights and information and also knowledge to me and also to all of everyone here. Thank you so much, everyone. See you next week. Bye bye.